Operation Epic Fury, ordered by President Donald Trump, has swiftly become a defining flashpoint in modern geopolitics, jolting the Middle East and sending shockwaves through global markets, energy corridors, and diplomatic alliances. When a decades-long standoff reaches a breaking point, does decisive action become recklessness or resolve? President Donald Trump's launch of Operation Epic Fury has redrawn the geopolitical map overnight, sending shockwaves through the global markets, energy corridors, and through diplomatic alliances. Now, while critics warn of escalation, supporters argue that confronting a persistent threat head-on may be the only way to reset a volatile region long defined by proxy wars and nuclear brinksmanship. Well, as the world watches oil prices surge and airspace close across the Middle East, one question lingers, and it is, was this a gamble, or was it a calculated move to force a new balance of power? Well, welcome to the Flash News. I'm Star Smart. Let's begin. In the early hours of February 28, 2026, we saw the United States and Israel initiate a sweeping military campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran, a dramatic escalation in decades-long tensions that has rippled across the Middle East and beyond. And that was the start of Operation Epic Fury, as codenamed by the United States Department of Defense, and known as Operation Lion's Roar by Israeli forces. The offensive saw waves of precision strikes delivered from the air, sea, and land aimed at crippling Iran's military infrastructure, nuclear and missile facilities, and top leadership from Tehran to Isfahan and other major cities like Qom. While satellite imagery and official releases show that key compounds, including the fortified residence of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, were struck heavily, with reports indicating the deaths of Khamenei and other senior figures as part of the opening blows. The scale and ferocity of Epic Fury go far beyond a limited cross-border clash. The United States Central Command stated that more than 1,000 targets were hit by American and Israeli forces using a diverse arsenal of aircraft, missiles, drone, and naval firepower, marking one of the largest coordinated military campaigns in the region in years. Iranian air defense and missile sites were among the primary objectives, alongside command and control centers that underpin Tehran's ability to project power. Iran responded within hours with its own barrage of missiles and drones targeted at Israel and the U.S. military bases across the Gulf, including in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, underscoring how rapidly the situation has escalated into broader regional warfare. Now, these counterattacks have inflicted casualties, disrupted civilian life, and drawn in neighboring states into an expanded security crisis. The human cost of the operation has been stark. United States Central Command confirmed that 3 American service members were killed in action, and at least 5 were seriously wounded, with additional personnel suffering shrapnel injuries and concussions during the initial days of combat.
Earlier today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible where that won't be the case. But America will avenge their deaths and deliver the most punishing blow to the terrorists who have waged war against basically civilization. They have waged war against civilization itself.
Well, this represents the first confirmed U.S. military fatalities tied to the offensive, highlighting the risk involved as hostilities continue. Domestically in the United States, President Donald Trump's decision to authorize Epic Fury has sparked fierce debate. Critics from across the political spectrum have blasted the operation as reckless and unnecessary, pointing to a lack of clear evidence that Iran posed as imminent threat to the United States forces or territory, and arguing that diplomatic avenues were still viable just days before the strikes. But on how true is that? We see some opponents have framed the decision as a war of choice, warning that it could drag the United States deeper into a protracted conflict with unpredictable blowback. Beyond questioning the timing and legality of the attack, major criticisms also center on concerns over international law, regional stability, and the humanitarian toll. Opponents argue that eliminating Iranian leadership and targeting military infrastructure could harden resistance rather than foster conditions for peace, potentially triggering wider violence and drawing in global powers with vested interest in the Middle East. Supporters of Operation Epic Fury have responded sharply to these critiques, defending the strikes as a necessary and decisive move to confront what they characterize as a long-standing threat. The Trump administration and its backers argue that Iran's nuclear ambitions, development of ballistic missiles, support for proxy militias, and history of hostile rhetoric towards Israel and the United States created a perilous security environment that demanded action.
These actions are right and they are necessary to ensure that Americans will never have to face a radical, bloodthirsty terrorist regime armed with nuclear weapons and lots of threats. For almost 50 years, these wicked extremists have been attacking the United States while chanting the slogan, "Death to America" or "Death to Israel," or both. They are the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. We are the world's greatest and most powerful nation, so we can do something about what they do. These intolerable threats will not continue any longer. I once again urge the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranian military and police, to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty.
While in statements supporting Epic Fury, some have questioned the logic of allowing a regime they view as oppressive and aggressive to endure unchallenged, asserting that decisive military pressure could weaken Tehran's capacity for violence and open space for the Iranian people to reclaim their country. I'll never understand those who would rather let a genocidal regime remain in power than stop it at all costs. These are the statements of some defenders of the Operation Epic Fury, as they have argued, reflecting the belief among certain commentators and political allies that military intervention was the only viable path to neutralize what they see as an existential threat posed by Iran. Now, this perspective holds that strategic force, while costly, might finally break cycles of violence and grant oppressed populations within Iran a chance at self-determination. In a televised address following the launch of Epic Fury, President Donald Trump sought to frame the campaign within a broader vision of security and liberation as what it is. He described the operation as one of the most complex and powerful military offensives in modern history, reiterating his view that Iran's leadership had inflicted suffering both domestically and across the region. Let's take a listen.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead. This wretched and vile man had the blood of hundreds and even thousands of Americans on his hands and was responsible for the slaughter of countless thousands of innocent people all across many countries. Last night, all over Iran, the voices of the Iranian people could be heard cheering and celebrating in the streets when his death was announced.
President Trump emphasized that combat operations would continue in full force until strategic objectives were met, and he called on the Iranian people to rise up and take back their country once the violence subsided. His remarks aimed to recast the offensive not simply as a military strike, but as a catalyst for a new chapter in Iranian governance and Middle Eastern peace. Well, as Epic Fury enters into second week, the implications are profound. The conflict has already reshaped diplomatic alignments, strained global energy markets, and raised urgent questions about the future of international security in a deeply interconnected world. Whether it will achieve its goal or deepen the chaos remains to be seen, but its impact will reverberate far beyond the skies of Tehran. Well, still on what the war with Iran has done, we see the widening conflict between Israel, the United States, and Iran that has plunged more of the Middle East into open confrontation with fresh airstrikes, missile barrages, and economic shockwaves underscoring the scale of the crisis. Today, we see that Israel carried out the heavy bombardments across southern Lebanon following rocket fire attributed to Hezbollah, further expanding a war that began days earlier with coordinated U.S.-Israeli strikes inside Iran. As the front lines multiplied, several American warplanes reportedly went down in Kuwait amid active operations in the Gulf region, while Iran intensified its retaliation with missile and drone attacks targeting U.S. and Israeli-linked assets across the region. We see the escalation followed the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in earlier strikes the Israeli and U.S. officials described as aimed at dismantling Iran's military command structure. Has framed its response as legitimate self-defense and retaliation, launching missiles towards Israeli territory and striking strategic sites across the Gulf. A Saudi oil refinery was set ablaze after being hit, and smoke was seen rising from the vicinity of the U.S. Embassy complex in Kuwait, amplifying fears that diplomatic and energy infrastructure are increasingly at risk. Since Saturday, Israeli and American forces have conducted sustained strikes across Iranian territory, targeting military installations, missile depots, and command facilities. What began as a high-impact operation aimed at Iran's leadership has now spread well beyond its borders. Explosions have been reported in Dubai, Bahrain, and parts of Iraq, while regional airstrike disruptions have forced hundreds of flight cancellations. The strategic Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime corridor through which roughly a fifth of the world's seaborne oil passes, has been severely disrupted, with ships' movement contained and curtailed, reports of vessels coming under attack as well. The near paralysis of the Strait has intensified concerns over global energy security. President Donald Trump has vowed to retaliate forcefully for the death of American service members killed during the opening phase of the strikes. In remarks to the U.S. media, he indicated that Washington and Israel possesses the capacity to sustain their current level of military operations for up to 4 or 5 weeks if necessary. His comments signal that the campaign is not envisioned as a short-lived exchange, but potentially a prolonged confrontation with strategic objectives extending beyond immediate retaliation. Financial markets reacted swiftly. Oil and gas prices surged sharply at the start of trading in Asia as investors priced in the possibility of a drawn-out war in one of the world's most energy-rich regions. Brent crude jumped nearly 14% at one point, while West Texas Intermediate rose close to 12%, reflecting fears of supply disruption stemming from instability in Iran and the effective shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. Equity markets across Asia slid deep into negative territory, with indices in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Mumbai, Bangkok, Wellington, and Taipei registering steep losses. The U.S. futures also fell by more than 1%, signaling expectations of global economic turbulence. The combination of disrupted oil flows, rising geopolitical risk, and investor uncertainty has raised alarms about inflationary pressure and broader economic instability. Should the conflict drag on, the implications of this expanding war stretch far beyond the battlefield. Beyond the immediate humanitarian and security toll, the confrontation threatens to redraw regional alliances, strain global supply chains, and inject volatility into already fragile global markets. As long as the Strait of Hormuz remains constrained and tit-for-tat strikes continue, the risk of a wider multi-theater war remains quite high. And in Africa, we see the Pan-African Manufacturers Association has described the one-year extension of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, as a crucial but temporary relief for African exporters, cautioning that the reprieve does not offer the long-term certainty needed for transformative industrial investment. In its latest monthly report released in Lagos, the association's president, Mansour Ahmed, welcomed the decision by the United States authorities to extend the trade program through December 31st, 2026, after it lapsed in September 2025. The extension was signed into law on February 3rd by President Donald Trump, restoring preferential access to the United States market for eligible African countries. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA Africa, grants qualifying African nations duty-free access to more than 1,800 public product categories spanning textiles, apparel, agricultural goods, and manufactured products. Now, for many exporters across the continent, AGOA has been a key gateway to the world's largest consumer market, supporting jobs and foreign exchange earnings. Ahmed emphasized that while the extension stabilizes trade flows in the short term, it falls short of providing the predictability required for capital-intensive industrial expansion. Manufacturers contemplating major investments in machinery, processing facilities, or supply chain upgrades require multi-year policy certainty to justify long payback periods. A one-year horizon, he argued, does little to inspire confidence among investors seeking durable access to the United States market. While the association is urging African governments and private sector stakeholders to treat the extension not as a comfort zone but as a strategic window. The limited time frame, according to PAMA, should be used to deepen value addition, strengthen regional supply chains, and enhance competitiveness under the African Continental Free Trade Area framework. Now, without structural improvements in infrastructure, energy reliability, logistics, and regulatory coordination, Africa risks remaining primarily an exporter of raw commodities rather than higher value manufactured goods. The broader significance of AGOA's temporary renewal lies in what it signals about the evolving nature of the United States-Africa trade relations. While the extension prevents immediate disruption, it also highlights the vulnerability of African exporters to shifting policy cycles in Washington. For the continent's manufacturing sector, the message is clear. Long-term resilience cannot depend solely on preferential trade schemes, but must be built on diversified markets, stronger domestic production, ecosystem, and greater regional integration. As the December 31st deadline approaches, the choices made now by policymakers and industry leaders could determine whether the extension becomes a stepping stone towards industrial transformation or simply a pause before renewed uncertainty. More, we see Melania Trump in a precedent-setting moment at the United Nations, scheduled to preside over a session of the United Nations Security Council, becoming the First Lady of the United States to chair a meeting of the powerful 15-member body. The session focused on children, technology, and education in conflict, places global attention on the intersection of war, digital transformation, and youth development. According to the First Lady's office, discussions will underscore how access to education, particularly in conflict-affected regions, can serve as a stabilizing force, promoting tolerance, countering extremism, and laying the groundwork for long-term peace. The appearance marks a significant diplomatic step for Melania Trump, who has traditionally maintained a lower public profile compared to many of her predecessors, by taking the chair at the Security Council. The UN organ charged with maintaining international peace and security, she moves beyond ceremonial advocacy into a high-visibility, multilateral forum typically reserved for heads of state, foreign ministers, and senior diplomats. The theme of the meeting reflects growing global concern over the vulnerability of children in modern conflict. Wars in multiple regions have disrupted schooling for millions, while the rapid expansion of digital technology has introduced both opportunity and risk. Advocates argue that technology can help bridge education gaps through remote learning and digital resources. Even in fragile environments, at the same time, misinformation, online radicalization, and cyber exploitation have emerged as serious threats to young people caught in crisis zones. Well, by framing education as a tool for tolerance and peace building, the session seeks to connect humanitarian priorities with broader security objectives. The argument advanced by supporters of the initiative is that sustainable peace cannot be achieved solely through military or diplomatic measures. It must also address the social foundations that shape future generations. Investing in safe, accessible, and technological supported education systems, particularly in war-torn societies, is viewed as a preventive strategy against cycles of violence. Melania Trump's participation also carries symbolic weight for the United States' engagement at the UN. With global institutions navigating heightened geopolitical tensions, her leadership of the session signals an effort by Washington to highlight soft power initiatives alongside hard security policy. It underscores an emphasis on child welfare and education as central components of international stability rather than peripheral humanitarian concerns. The broader implication of the meeting weigh more and may extend beyond its immediate resolutions or statements. By elevating the issue to the Security Council level, the United States and its partners aim to reinforce the idea that protecting children's access to education, even amid conflict, is not only a moral obligation, but a strategic necessity in building a more peaceful international order. With that, we've come to the end of today's Flash News. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.